Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. My name is Emery Cuzzy, and I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby. And today we're going to talk about the biggest winners after the schedule released. We're going to just kind of go through everybody that, kind of has the easy end of the year schedule, of course, but also, just totality of the schedule, what makes it that much better. And then also comparing it to their ADP. If, like, we have, of course, our rankings prior to the schedule being released. We haven't put those out yet, but now that the schedule's released, are people going to move up? Are they going to move back? It's going to change everything because when you play certain teams, week 13 through 17, you get those matchups that are going to hurt your scoring. You need those matchups. Those are the big playoff weeks. So
we're going to get right into it. We start off with Trevor Lawrence, very polarizing, former number one overall pick. Right now, he is a mid QB2 among pretty much everybody, 15 to 20. We are going to be much higher on him, and for good reason. We expect a bounce back year. That's just plain and simple. He really just came out the gate struggling last year. Obviously, did not live up to his ADP billing. I think he was around a QB8, QB7. That was kind of right where we had him, and obviously he struggled, but the team was successful. And then he started to hit a rhythm, and then he just dealt with multiple injuries. This year, I think he brings in Brian Thomas Jr. to replace Calvin Ridley. I think that's a better complement as a deep threat and consistent to where he can spread the ball around, because we saw Calvin Ridley frankly disappear on
yeah,
multiple stretches last year. And Christian Kirk, obviously, he had a really solid stretch and severely hurt his groin. Zay Jones obviously gone too, but they bring in Gabe Davis as kind of like a wash for the most part, and then Evan Ingram, who somehow was tight end 2 last year.
yeah.
And then obviously his productive running back, Travis Etienne. So he has a lot of weapons to work with. Schedule is just kind of right where it should be. It's in,
Yeah, get Tennessee twice, and then you get the Raiders. I mean, I'm a Raiders fan, but we are not the best at secondary. We haven't been for a while.
Mhm.
Houston has a number one corner, but after that, they're kind of on the lower end. And then you get the Jets, who obviously has an
It'll
amazing
be tough,
defense.
but
But
it's at home. It's in fair weather, and we just think right now where he's going is just way too low.
yeah,
Compared to everybody else. I mean, he's got way more upside than somebody like Tua, and Tua had his ceiling performance last year,
mm-hmm.
and he still was like QB 14. So Trevor Lawrence, we saw QB 7, I believe, in 2022. He has rushing touchdown upside. He has 4,500 plus
Right.
yard upside. Um, he'll be riding the thick of things to where I don't know if he'll be a division, bring them back to being a division winner again, but they should be competitive in every game, and it's going to warrant him throwing the ball.
Yeah, and then I think I think Trevor Lawrence is one of the easier ones on this list out of all the quarterbacks to say, the schedule did him well, and he should move up. Caleb Williams next. Gets Detroit twice. Detroit had one of the worst defenses or worst secondaries in football last year. I know they brought a bunch in and attacked that, but they're on this list because they were, 30th out of 32. San Francisco's good. At San Francisco, that's gonna be a hard game. But then at Minnesota, one of the worst secondaries in football, and then Seattle. It's just one of those guys. Caleb Williams just has all of the pieces in place to be good, and confidence is key. They're going to win a lot of games. Confidence is going to come. Then they're going to come to these games in, of course, Detroit, Minnesota, Detroit. Those are all conference games or division games. Those are going to be really important. We'll see if he can step up. And at this point in the year, getting Seattle and Minnesota in the playoffs is huge for a quarterback. So
Right. Yeah. Anybody that ends up with him as your QB2 or even QB1, you get a similar guy, you should feel very good about it. I think last year, for the most part, at least in best ball, the mid or second tier of quarterbacks, the Joe Burrows and Justin Fields at the times and Justin Herberts, etc., they were going all in like the 5th round and then early 6th. And then you would get maybe the next tier like in Dak and 2 in the 7th. Well, I feel like there were so many that underperformed mostly because of injury. It pushed all those guys back. And on top of that, you add Kyler Murray back to the fold and Anthony Richardson a second year, and there's more guys. And so that same tier of quarterbacks is going like 3 rounds later
mm-hmm.
than it should. And he's smack dab in the middle. You can get him right now in best ball drafts as the 11th quarterback off the board in the early ninth round or late eighth, depending on where you're drafting. And I feel really good about that when I'm able to stack.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
on
was
top of
about to
that,
say.
yeah,
Hmm.
and on top of that, something that we in our hates video or scheduled losers rather video that we talked about. We love Miami; they're going to score a lot of points, but it's hard to justify picking Tua where he's going, which is the same range basically where Caleb is going, and then also invest, this first overall pick pretty much with Tyreek Hill or being your wide receiver 2 in Jalen Waddle or either RB2 for HN or Mostert. You can't really stack. Whereas, you know, DJ Moore is going in the third. If you believe in him more than Keenan Allen, that's
Yeah,
perfectly reasonable for wide receiver 1 to
yeah,
go in a good offense. Keenan Allen right now is way separated compared to what we think. We think they should be right next to each other in the rankings. Whether you like DJ Moore or Keenan Moore, it's up to you. But they're spread out like by a full 2 rounds.
yeah.
So very reasonable to get Keenan. You can get him as a wide receiver 3 and still stack him with Caleb Williams. It's and then Cole Kmet is like tight end 15.
Yeah, exactly. You can get him
So
in the
Roma Dunze is, of all these rookie receivers, he's going after Brian Thomas and Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey,
yeah.
a lot of guys that have never really had a statistically full season that you would want in fantasy. Um, yeah, it's really easy to get to, and that's why we like it so much.
Yeah, I love the stack. I mean, you get the quarterback, you get all the talent with him. I see no problem. And if they're winning, you should expect somewhat good fantasy production out of them. And then you go to Jordan Love. We're still on the fence on him. I'll be very honest. He's going, we're on the fence if he's going to be the guy. But the freaking schedule was just so nice. We could not leave him off this list because you get Miami, get at Detroit, who we just talked about not being as good as everybody thinks they are in the secondary, at Seattle, New Orleans, and then at Minnesota. I mean, you tell me because you got the stats up, but I feel like every single one of them is at least 20 or worse last year. I mean, all those teams are at least 20 or worse.
Yeah,
And
so obviously we time and time again I've brought up Nick Mullins twice throwing for 400 plus yards. Miami just kind of fell apart towards the end and was giving up things. Secondary's okay, but it's not end all be all. And then Seattle, they basically lost everybody but Devon Witherspoon in their back seven. And then Minnesota, obviously, they've always struggled with their secondary
yeah.
since they've kind of aged out their guys and they just can't hit on their picks. He has all the matchups and he has reasonable, atmospheres
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the season. And then with his, again, we're going to talk about stacking.
Easier to stack, for
whoever
sure.
you think is the wide receiver 1, I view it as Jaden Reed, as like a similar to Deebo Samuel. None of them are going in the top 35 right now.
Right.
And so you don't even have to get a Green Bay receiver to wide receiver 4, and you could still stack in the 8th round with Jordan Love. It's really nice to think about.
What do you think? You got Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks, and then Luke Musgrave. Like all four
Romeo
of those.
Dobbs is
Romeo Dobbs.
way late. So
all of those guys are at 100 or worse, easy. So I think Romeo Dobbs is the highest of the 5. I think. And
I'd have to look because he's not even in our top 60.
Exactly. So it's like you just have this weird. You have a quarterback that's top 10 with no receivers that are top 30. It's like, okay.
But the difference I think I'll place with him versus Caleb Williams, I think people are willing to let Caleb Williams drop a little bit because it's the unknown of being a rookie in Chicago. Whereas Jordan Love, we saw the lighting in the bottle. We saw the second half, how he finished as a top 5 quarterback the last second half of the season.
Right.
And so the hype is there. And so right now he's QB 10, QB 9 in every single platform that we're talking with. And we have him right below that, but in that range. I just don't see him because on occasion you'll see a quarterback fall around late because if you're in between everyone's already gotten a quarterback or there's just drafts that people just want to wait. I don't see people waiting for him or letting him drop. Whereas Caleb Williams, I think people would be like, I already got somebody, or I have Tua that I can get at the same time and I can just coin flip between them.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the thing I view it is really he's going in the 7th round, and you can't, if you have an early 8th round pick, pass on him with your 7th turn and then be like, oh, fingers crossed that he'll drop to me, because I don't think he will.
Well, another thing for me is how do you break tiers, right? We were talking about this on our losers video. How do you pick a guy and say, oh, well, he should be the top of the tier? Well, schedule is a good way to go about it. And at the end of the year, when Caleb Williams gets Minnesota, Detroit, and Seattle, you're very happy, having him as your quarterback. While you might say, oh, well, let's go with Tua. Well, Tua was on our losers list because schedule is difficult. And so your coin flip might backfire just for that reason. I do want to go on a slight tangent because we have a friend that was like, well, the Bears have never done it. They haven't done it yet. They haven't done it yet. Will they jive? Will they jive? There's so much talent in Chicago right now. I mean, top to bottom, you look at their whole roster. O-line's good. Receivers, maybe top 3 receiver core. Running back room is really good. Caleb Williams is there. Defense is okay, but will probably give up points. Well, Caleb Williams now, then, when there's points being given up on defense and you have all this offensive talent, he's going to have to score. And he will, right? Will they jive? I think so. I think there's just too many good football players. And as long as they don't allow their heads to have an issue on the field, they're going to be very good at football. And so Caleb Williams could even go higher than this in my eyes. We saw CJ Stroud last year, guy that no one was picking, do some amazing things.
Not even with the top 18.
Yeah, and with way less talent.
Yes.
And now you got Caleb Williams going to an opportunity to have between 10 and 12 wins, and none of us should be surprised by it. So that's just a quick tangent. But yeah, moving over to running backs. First running back on the board. There's 3 of them, actually, funny enough.
Yeah.
So the Chargers running backs, they kind of get the end of the year where, they can kind of run through anybody at that point. We just don't know who it's going to be. On the board, you can see I put Gus Edwards up there. Those are where he was. He's the number 1 running back in that offense based on ADP. But I'm a big fan of, taking shots on Kamani Vidal. Late round he's 171 right now, I believe, or something like that. But in the 170s,
right around the 16th, 17th round.
Yeah,
so he would be undrafted in redraft leagues.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't have to worry about stashing him. He could be a waiver until he pops off for the 15 touches that maybe he'll get on a week-to-week basis. So this is more a best ball, bringing him up, but it's just a situation in general. Jim Harbaugh, such a run-heavy approach that he does, and he just has a bunch of Jags, just of guys that we just can't place. And so they're all uncomfortably, ranked to us. I believe we have Gus by default as the starter for now. He is bottom 3 in terms of starting running backs in the league, but he's by far the best situation of the 3 when you have, whether you think Chase Brown, Zach Moss, or and then you got Devin Singletary, who's in the worst situation with the Giants now. Obviously, Gus Edwards has the upside. He has touchdown upside. He's frustrating on a weekly basis. He's always going to be a tournament play because he's never going to rise in price, and he's always just going to have occasional games where he pops off.
Yeah.
And when you are drafting your RB4, RB5, that's all you're looking for is good situations, good matchups, and somebody that 4 or 5 times a year can get you 15, 20 points.
Right. And then you look at the other 2, if you think about it just for a second, there's a lot of injury history in this room. And that's why Kamani Vidal is a good idea to bring up for best ball.
Yes.
Is because Gus Edwards has been injured. J.K. Dobbins hasn't played because of his injuries. And as sad as it is and how good he was, I don't know that he can be that guy anymore. Kamani Vidal is possibly going to walk into 15, 20 touches because Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball. He wants to run the ball. And
what's funny is just when we did our prospect rankings, he wasn't even in our honorable mentions.
No.
And he just fell into one of the few situations that if running back fell to Dallas or fell to the Chargers, we were going to love it. As much as we didn't like Blake Corum, if he fell to the Chargers, he probably would be in our top 30.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's just kind of is what it is with that. And so really easy matchups, and it's a great situation for them. Whoever can stand out, you kind of got to take your chance. But when you're drafting any of them 11th round plus, it's very low risk.
It kind of reminds me of Chicago last year.
Mhm.
You know, Chicago, you had 3 running backs there, didn't know who was going to do it. And then at the end of the year, no one really just took over. And that could be a similar situation that we have here.
And that also kind of brings up why it's so important sometimes on multiple reasons to, stack running backs or handcuff it per se. This isn't technically a handcuff because handcuff implies like a Josh Jacobs situation to Marshawn Lloyd, whereas Josh Jacobs is going to get probably 80% of the touches. But if he goes down, it's all going to this one guy.
Right.
Tyler Algier to Bijan. This is, you draft multiple of them. You draft Vidal in the 16th or 17th, and you draft Gus Edwards. One of them's eventually going to pair out. But if you just combine them and be like, hey, I can get 7-8 weeks of
this week and this
good
week,
production by having both of them on my team. Like, backups like that are way more important to you than it is Joe Blow Schmo that's just throwing a flyer at somebody.
Right.
Just because on the risky weeks that you just don't know if he's going to pan out all year, well, if he's going to get benched or he's going to get hurt or whatever, it's probably going to go to one of these guys. So it's probably important to have a couple of them if the price is right.
Yeah, I'm going to give away one of my favorite stacks. It's Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
You got Rico Dowdle and you got Zeke. And I'm going to stack the heck out of that team because Zeke's had injuries. Zeke is, of course, the big back. But all of a sudden, Dowdle comes in and he gets 12 to 15 touches. That's pretty solid for a backup running back. That's the same kind of thing you're doing here. You're just stacking as many guys on that team because you know that they're going to do well. 35th ADP for Gus, and it's like 50th for Vidal. That's not that much to pay for a running back one tandem to me. So
yeah, I think it's a little different with Dallas. Completely agree with your point of grabbing them both, but you basically got to do it back to back because right now Zeke is going mid 30 to 40 in terms of overall running backs, and then Rico's right behind him at like 45.
Right.
So basically, it's when your pick comes up in 12 picks or 6 picks, if you don't pick him now, he's not going to be there when you get back.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to go back to back, and if you're comfortable doing that, more power to you.
Yeah.
But with these guys, it's 11th round, I'll take him, and then I got 4 picks I can hit other needs, and then I can worry about a guy that probably nobody's thinking about because he's not a big name.
Right, of course. All right, now Bijan. Bijan's on this list. It's really weird that when you put really good football players on a list like this,
right?
Because how much more can he move up? Well, can he pass Christian McCaffrey? Well, no, that's not necessarily why he's here.
Mm-hmm.
He just happens to have such an easy stretch. Oh my gosh, like it's crazy. Gets the Chargers at home. It goes to Minnesota. Minnesota is not the same defensive line as they've had. At the Raiders, we have an okay defensive line, but that doesn't change the fact that it's Bijan Robinson. And then you go to the Giants and then Washington. It's just like bad team after bad team after bad team. They're going to be up in those games. He's going to be running the ball. And it just makes a lot of sense to put him here. Breece Hall and him are really close to me, 2 and 3. And this type of stuff makes you move him over Breece Hall.
Right. Yeah. And so, again, with him, is based on where you're drafting him. And last year, I had, because there's such a track record, a successful track record of early running backs or running backs that are rookies that are going to get guaranteed touches, having a good track record. There's been at least 2 finish as top 24 running backs for the last 7 years. Plus, I can do more research and get more numbers, but I probably got to buy them. But the research I have from 2017 on, it's happened. And a lot of times it's happened more than that. Like the Christian McCaffrey year, there was 5.
Yeah.
So that just kind of shows that opportunity is all that matters. Problem is last year, he was drafted as RB2 or RB3, finished as RB10 in that range. He's still your RB1. He still had pretty consistent, but he never had the boom weeks.
Right.
And a lot of that was scheme-wise, whereas they're doing tight end rounds to Jonnu Smith multiple times on the goal line in the same possession.
Arthur Smith, man.
Tyler Algier. I like Tyler Algier, but
he's not Bijan Robinson.
He's not Bijan. And this guy needs to have 20 to 25 touches every game. And if he's not, then he better have the big plays, and then get it. They better both be working.
You're
it can't just be one or the
almost.
Otherwise, why'd you pick him in the eighth overall?
Yeah, exactly.
This year, new regime. It's more air raid esque, and obviously that's not going to give him 20 carries. But you don't need 20 carries to be an RB, top 5 RB.
No.
Jahmyr Gibbs was a top 5 RB last year, and he had less than 10 carries a game. So opportunities there. Like you said, the schedule is just super easy, and his ADP is basically the same because so many receivers panned out that he's like 9th overall, 10th overall. He's in the first round. That's what you got to invest in him. But again, it's tiebreakers between Breece Hall and him. Breece Hall, phenomenal anomaly coming off a ACL injury, finishing as RB2 last year. And I don't deny that he will be right there again. But New York Jets don't have the schedule that Atlanta has. And those are the kinds of things that we look at when we're drafting in best ball or auction or what have you.
So one thing I will say about this, you just said about the rookies and all that stuff. I want you to find me 2 rookies that you're confident or even comfortable betting to be top 24 running backs. 2 of them, because I just don't see it. The guys that will end up doing that are guys like Kamani Vidal that we just talked about, because he's going to get the opportunities if someone goes down, injury history and stuff. We'll talk about a guy in a second, in Jonathan Brooks. Got all the workload. But after that, we didn't like any of the situations where these guys went, and it's going to be really hard to find some rookie running backs that are going to make those top 24s, But moving over to Jonathan Taylor, he has the week 14 bye, which we don't like to see. That's one thing that, of course, takes away from him. But then he goes to Denver, Tennessee at home, and then at the Giants. And you're like, okay, well, I think I can deal with the week 14 bye when I'm going to get that as my playoff run. I just have to make sure I get there. And so that's the biggest issue, is that he has that 14 bye.
So basically every one of his last opponents were bottom 10 against running backs last year. And obviously New England's defense is always stingy, but they're going to play from behind. That means more volume, and volume is king in fantasy football. You look at Denver, they were the team that infamously got 70 dropped on them and 8 touchdowns by 2 running backs. And obviously they improved over the year, but again, they're going to be a team playing from behind a lot. Volume is king. Giants, in our eyes, they're the bet favorite for us to be the worst team in football this year.
Yeah.
They're going to be behind a lot. Volume is king. That's all I can say. And the thing with Anthony Richardson, hype train is there. He has never been a high volume passer.
Right.
So the only issue with him is he going to have 15 rushing touchdowns, which it's not in the realm of possibility, but also him getting hurt so much, I don't think that they're going to just QB draw, because they realize, okay, all right, we got to temper our expectations. Also, they had 2 snaps the entire 2023 seasons together. 2 snaps, because obviously the injury holdout injury for Jonathan Taylor, when he got back again, first quarter, and then Richardson goes down. So really, we don't know how this backfield will work, but we've seen how good Jonathan Taylor is when he's healthy. It just kind of depends on the ADP, because right now he's right where we had him, and I figured that we were going to be kind of higher than others. And right now it's probably going to stay where it's going to be at.
Right. Yeah, I think he makes a lot of sense being top 6. Just going back into the situation that he's in, he's going to do great. It is what it is.
And now that fantasy football, like I said, the last 2 years, the high-end running backs, there's been a lot of them that have not panned out. And so more receivers are being taken, especially in PPR leagues, especially in best ball.
Right.
It's more reliable source of fantasy output. So there's not as many running backs going in the first round anymore. So RB6 can be taken at the end of the second round. I got him 23rd overall in a draft yesterday. So that's just kind of the difference of it now. And even though RB6, RB5 is probably where he's going to be throughout our rankings for the most part, that doesn't mean his ADP is going to reflect that where it should.
Yeah, completely agree. And then the one rookie on this list, Jonathan Brooks. I mean, we all knew Carolina had one of the easiest schedules in football based on the fact that they were last in their division. They also have the easiest division in football, so that gives them a lot of opportunity. Going to play Tampa Bay twice, Arizona, Philly, and Dallas in the last 5 weeks. Jonathan Brooks, if he is healthy, he has all the opportunity in the world because he has no one to really fight him for touches. I mean, we can make the case for Chuba Hubbard. I don't want to because it's just not worth it. But If he is healthy, he will be, his ADP will be higher. He will be a top 20 running back in my eyes. So
Right. So we look at it last year, and I have the second half of the season pulled up, and Chuba Hubbard on the worst team, 2-15 team, was RB18 in terms of points per game, 12.6 in PPR, and so he was not highly rostered because nobody wanted to start Carolina Panthers. But this year, I don't anticipate him taking many touches. He's going to be a slow burn because he is coming off of ACL. I don't think he'll be an IR candidate. He'll miss time, at least unless he re-aggravates. Knock on wood, that does not happen. But maybe touches limited, 10 to 12 for a good chunk of the first half of the season. Think
Right.
Jahmyr Gibbs, how frustrating it was where, David Montgomery was getting every single goal line touch and every single important carry. We talk about the 3rd and 1s and the goal line touches and, fourth quarter ahead, those guys, he was getting all of them. And fantasy owners for Jahmyr Gibbs loathed it.
sold him.
Exactly. And
Except for me.
And so they sold him, and he ends up being a top 5 fantasy running back because people needed patience.
So it's kind of funny. I had Jahmyr Gibbs and Cam had David Montgomery.
Yes.
And so for the whole year, we were trying to. We both ended up in the playoffs. It was one of those things, and we were just arguing about who was going to end up being the better fantasy producer. And at the end of the day, yes, Jahmyr Gibbs finally figured it out. But I also had to pay a lot more for him than David Montgomery. So.
But it also, who ended up going further? It was because I couldn't have consistent RB production, and you end up having those ceiling games towards the end of the season, which helped you vault into the playoffs. That's the whole point of these videos, is finding the ceilings at the end of the season.
Yeah, because when it matters.
If you're a good fantasy owner, you can play the waiver wire and have your consistent guys get you to your 9-5 record. But when it's 9-5 versus 9-5, who's going to have the edge at the very end? And it's going to be guys that have the ceiling games. And that's what Jahmyr had last year. Jonathan Brooks, again, similar, easy schedule, and not a ton of workload. And he's got the narrative of rookie running backs just volume is king.
Yeah.
So right now, it's kind of different. ESPN 23 is probably too high for our liking. But, in the 30 range is kind of where we view him. But again, I think it's a slow burn. It's a guy that will have a candidate of buying low on at the midway point through the season because he probably won't have the bang game yet, but it's coming.
Right.
And he eventually is going to pay off for you. He probably won't start more than 5 times for you if you play regular redraft fantasy. He'll be your RB4 and he'll just be stashed and just wait.
Well, he's not your RB4 if you play ESPN apparently. But yes, if you're playing Yahoo like we do, or Sleeper, you're probably going to get him as a late RB3. So
yeah, and right now in best ball, he's going right around the 100th overall pick, which is 9th round, 10th round, and
reasonable.
Very, very reasonable. Wouldn't be surprised if he shot up a couple rounds, a la James Cook last year, where I know he wasn't a rookie, but uncertain situation, and then they're like, oh, he's the guy.
Yeah.
And then he vaults up to like 60. And then it's just like, oh, that's too high.
Yeah.
So I don't think he'll be that high of a jump, but he's definitely going to rise. Just buy low when you can if you are drafting already in May.
Yeah.
Like us crackheads.
Hello. But so next we're going to go to wide receiver. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans made this list because of the fact that they have a very easy schedule to end the year. Carolina twice. And I know that Carolina was a top 5 defense last year, but a lot of their players are gone. They have a lot of rebuilding. We're not sure what's going to happen there. Then the Raiders, the Chargers, and Dallas to end it all. This is kind of the group that's the guys that, we're going to have to see making plays when it comes down to this because they're going to be in the hunt for the playoffs and they're going to be Baker will be slinging the ball. So,
yeah, obviously they're defending NFC South champs with an easier schedule. The entire NFC South is going to have easier schedules, and they get to play Carolina twice, and Dallas, who is susceptible to boom games in environments like that. That's just typical. Chargers, one of the, I guess, least depth in terms of secondaries now because their recent signings and draft picks didn't work. And then Raiders, they have a great front seven, but their weakness is secondary.
Yeah.
So a lot of easy matchups, like you said. It's just kind of justifying, where they're going. And right now, Mike Evans is right now late third, and Chris Godwin is actually the one that stands out even more.
Oh yeah.
Just because he's going in the 40s in terms of overall, receivers. We have him kind of in the 30s. He's right in the smack dab middle of tier 5. And he might rise just because of this. The thing is with Chris Godwin, ton of injury history, and now he's approaching 30. You just don't know. Plus, it's a contract year. It is a big year for him to, finish strong. Either one of these guys goes down, the other one just exponentially vaults up.
Right.
Mike Evans, his ADP is already kind of right where it should be, as a very end of the line or receiver 1, and you should feel comfortable with it. And he's got a high volume passing offense that is one of the top or bottom 3 rushing efficiencies
Right.
over each of the last 2 seasons.
Yes.
Their running back who performed in fantasy was purely because he's a PPR king.
Oh yeah.
And so, it's the perfect environment for both. And especially for Godwin right now, if you're trying to climb and you're getting a wide receiver 5 in a, solid passing offense, like, go for it. It's like,
well, it's like JSN, Jack Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, this, kind of thing, how they got 3 guys and you're just like, can we get the ball to everybody?
If I remember correctly, last year, Godwin was going right around in the 50 overall range.
Yeah.
And Mike Evans was the one going in the 70s. And then Mike Evans, obviously, has one of his typical years because every year he's a 1,000-yard threat. And then Godwin was kind of in and out of the lineup. Never really had the boom game, but you probably never started him, and it wasn't worth it in a redraft league. Best ball, maybe he was your flex a couple times. Overall, it didn't work out, and that's why they have basically flipped. Is just because of recency bias and what we saw last year.
When Godwin is, he's a PPR guy. He gets a lot of receptions. He plays out of the slot. So it's not a bad choice to go with him as a fifth wide receiver option at that point. But jumping to the rookie on this list, Xavier Legette. This was a name you said, and I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Considering we just talked about, the running game, but now you look at the passing game and you're like, well, you have a similar story. He's going to get all the volume. Somewhat, I guess. Let me take that back. Deontay Johnson's there, but he's going to get a lot of volume down the field. He'll get the most air yards of any of the players on that team. And he's going as the 64th receiver in best ball right now. And I just find that way too low because he's just, even if he's not amazing, if he's not better, he's still a first round talent. But if he's not better than, I would be surprised if he's not better than Adam Thielen at this point in his career, or Jonathan Mingo, or any of the only person that actually poses a threat for targets is Deontay Johnson. They're going to have to throw the ball. They're going to be behind. So I don't see why he couldn't come out of nowhere and be good.
It's purely, again, similar to Jonathan Brooks because they're on the same team. Easier matchups, probably more so for the secondary purposes for Carolina than, running back purposes. On top of that, like you said, they will be behind trailing, throwing more. But you're buying low on, against the public. Public sees Bryce Young have one of the worst seasons and just like, I don't want to touch him because you have a terrible quarterback. And then just get somebody in the 13th, 14th round that is probably going to have at worst the second most targets on the team if he stays healthy. Think Nico Collins, Tank Dell last year, how they were both like 11th, 12th, and then 15th, 16th. And then I know John Mechie, people didn't know John Mechie or Tank Dell, who was going to be the guy. Early on, Tank Dell was like after 200 overall because it's like, oh, CJ Stroud is a rookie. I'm not sure. But then now it's like all of their receivers are in the top 50. And it's just because they're hot and that's where everybody's looking. Carolina, you saw terrible production, but we also saw Adam Thielen look like 2017 Adam Thielen for a good 4-week stretch. So it's there. There's ability for him to be there. And that doesn't mean that we're projecting Xavier Legette to come out, be a breakout candidate, to be a wide receiver 2 on your team. This is purely best ball.
Right.
Like you need, if somebody goes down for a couple weeks, somebody to get you 10 to 12 points or have the 3 for 90 and a touchdown out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
he's capable of being that because of the profile that he is.
You need to take stands when it comes to best ball. Last year I had 60% of Tank Dell. 60%. I was like, I take a stand that he's the better player. I'm from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He played at Houston, so I had like that, like, I hope, I pray that he's the better guy because I don't want it to be the Alabama guy type of thing. And it worked out. You have to take stands. Xavier Legette, Kamani Vidal, those types of stands are what win you these big tournaments and drafts when it comes to best ball.
Mm-hmm.
Being right on those types of guys. Because if you have 50% Xavier Legette, there is nobody else that will have that much Xavier Legette. And then you just have to be right. If he does as well as you think, you have Puka Nacua, come out as Xavier Legette's Puka Nacua this year. Puka was a 232nd ranked receiver last year in best ball.
I had 0%.
I had 4. So, but if Xavier Legette gives you that performance that Puka gave you,
you're winning a lot of money.
You only have to be right. You don't have to be as right on the rest of your lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get 60% of him, that means, say you have 100 lineups, 60 lineups have a chance of being really good already. Yeah. So,
and like you said with Tank Dell, you took a stand. I think I had a couple of shares of Tank Dell, but I mostly put my faith in John Mechie because of the narrative, overcoming his illness and returning after his rookie season.
Right.
He missed due to health reasons. I was like, okay, he's going to be the wide receiver too, that, 7 targets a game and, maybe the occasional, because he was the return specialist / gadget guy at Bama, and it was Tank Dell. So is what it is, right situation, wrong guy.
Right. Oh yeah.
But again, I drafted him in the 18th round. So big whoop.
Well, that was the thing too. The reason I have less Tank Dell is because he actually went from like 205, 210 and moved into like the 170s. And I was like, okay, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I have plenty. Let me go somewhere else at this point.
Yeah, and then with Puka, like you said, he started out like in the 240 range, and then he rose up to like 160.
Yeah.
And then we started to hear the buzz, and we're like, well, we missed the window, so we're not going to just play makeup.
Fade it.
And that did not work out.
No, we shouldn't have faded it. But, yeah, and then another guy that kind of had a rough, it's not even rough. I mean, he just went to a situation where there were so many good players. I think Rome Odunze this year. Jackson Smith-Njigba he's in Seattle, gets the Jets, Arizona, Green Bay, Minnesota, and Chicago, but he will not see any of their number 1 wide receivers. He's going to be playing out of the slot, and he's going to be torching those teams out of the slot. Mm-hmm. He's actually one of my favorite guys because of that situation. And I think that he gets a huge uptick this year. And I think, 4th wide receiver 4, end of the wide receiver 4 range. That's pretty solid value on DraftKings right now.
Yeah. With him, it actually wasn't as much of a dip in terms of, I've said like Seattle had the fewest amount of, or some of the fewest amount of 3 wide receiver sets. They actually didn't, but usually with the 3 wide receiver sets, that was to open the run game. Mm-hmm. It wasn't necessarily to sling it. Obviously he had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett to, that's what he got drafted into. Miles of a difference if he would have fell to the Chargers, which is what we had, which was, I believe, 2 spots later, and nobody had Seattle taking a receiver, and they took a receiver. Can't fault you. He was really good. And he was number 1 wide receiver. He fell to you at 21, I believe.
Yeah, so in that range right there.
Yeah, he just didn't go to a great situation, and, the volume wasn't there. This year, it's a new system coming from Washington, who had 3 different 1,000-yard receivers in, a 12-game season.
Yeah.
The volume will be there. Tyler Lockett will be 32 this year. And DK Metcalf, obviously, we've never been huge fans of him being a wide receiver 1, but I don't think he has the profile to handle a 12-target every week
I
workload. Agree. So, again, Seattle, we think taking a step back this year, new system, new coach. And, he could be a primary beneficiary of it. And right now his ADP, because of his struggling rookie season, it does not reflect where it should be. We're much higher on him. He probably has the highest differential.
Yeah, talent-wise too. You get a talented receiver. That's another thing too. I like drafting talent. I like betting on talent. And this is one of those guys where the situation might not be great, but the talent is really good. And if you take a shot on that, it will pan out sooner or later to me. So,
and another example, he's not on this list, but Quinn Johnston. Obviously, he was a laughing stock last year. He was the receiver taken right after JSN when the Chargers were going to take his receiver no matter what. Wouldn't say no matter what, but that's what we were projected. Had a miserable rookie year, and that was after Mike Williams goes down, and he has the opportunity, and he just does not hold on to it. Well, now Keenan Allen's gone, in addition to Mike Williams permanently being gone, and new running backs, new regime. The volume is there, and right now, because of his horrible rookie year, he's being drafted wide receiver 67. That's like a 16th round pick for a first round receiver that's 23 years old. So those kinds of things, taking a stand, getting some shares of guys that, well, he's going to be out the field for 90% of the snaps. So,
but I feel the narrative right now. I feel it. I feel our comment section being like, well, he can't catch the ball.
He can't.
Oh, he isn't a primary outside receiver. I hear all those things right now. I can feel it. Well, but it doesn't matter, because if he gets 100 attempts coming his way, well, I don't care if he drops 10 of them, because then he catches 90.
Yeah, Christian Watson doesn't have the best hands, and I'm not a big fan of him as a wide receiver on your team. But people are still drafting him high because they've seen, oh yeah, he can catch 4 for 100 and a touchdown on occasion.
Yeah, the athleticism.
And so right now he's going, top 40, and we're actually lower on him. I know you wanted to have him squeeze closer to Jayden Reed and justified it's a good offense, but Chargers will be a good offense. We just expect he's going to be lower passing volume. And correlating with that, because they don't have any great receivers, Justin Herbert's stock has plummeted. And so you can get him as QB 17 right now.
Well, Ladd McConkey's top 90, top 85, or something like that.
Again, we love him as a player.
Oh, yeah.
He's never had a great season that would warrant, oh, yeah, he's going to be a great fantasy asset.
We also said 100 times when you go watch our old videos that he's a wide receiver 2 in an offense. You're going to tell me that Josh Palmer's the wide receiver 1 or Quentin Johnston? It doesn't, just take shots on these guys later in rounds, because you are going to need to get some of these guys, and if you hit, you're going to be very happy in best ball drafts.
Right.
Talking about Christian Watson and Jayden Reed, they get Miami, Detroit, Seattle, New Orleans, and Minnesota. Lots of wide open secondaries. We talked about Jordan Love earlier. Christian Watson. I said I want Christian Watson on this list. You wanted Jayden Reed. The reason I want Christian Watson is because he has the boom games. Those games that, he'd randomly go for 6 for 120 and 2 touchdowns. Jayden Reed is more consistent across the board. Better route runner, those types of things. But both of them, I think, deserve to be on here. Dontavian Wicks could have been on here too. Because all of them have opportunities 1 week throughout the year where you're like, okay, if you get that offense right, you're going to be very happy.
Right. So, yeah, both of them essentially going as a wide receiver 4 or a flex. Obviously, Jayden Reed is right on the cusp of being wide receiver 3 range, whereas Watson is purely in the flex territory. Either way, not a horrible price tag. You're in a good offense. We had Jordan Love on the list for a good reason, because they're great matchups. Christian Watson had a atrocious rookie season for half a year, and then he was a god for half a year with catching touchdowns. He was kind of like Rashee Rice, and just he just for some reason was just always the guy to catch the touchdowns. Then last year, came into the year week 1 missed because of a hamstring injury, just never could recover from that. And he had a couple of games towards the end of the year where he had the Thanksgiving game where he had 100 yards in the first quarter and all that good stuff. Like you said, best ball, you're looking for those kinds of guys. But when he's healthy, it's just a projection game. Whereas like Jayden Reed, we saw the consistent 12 to 14, and then it became 18. But then at the same time, we see a wild card game where Green Bay drops 40 on Dallas, and he has 0 catches. So
we were wrong that week.
We lost a lot of money. It was a good time.
We were close.
Fun time. Yeah.
Anyways, one flip.
But yeah, it's hard to project, but neither of them have a hefty price tag right now that I think that I expected them to be actually higher in terms of consensus, and
Yeah.
I expected to be lower on Watson and higher on Reed. Whereas Reed, I'm kind of right a little bit higher, and then Watson, we're actually slightly higher than most of them.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect that. So that's just kind of like I said, you're reading the room and you're trying to make good pivots where you can, and that's kind of how we view both receivers. And then if you wanted to pass on them, Romeo Dobbs is like a 14th round pick, and Dontavius Wicks
Yeah.
is
16th,
back there.
16th
Luke
round
Musgrave
pick.
is like outside of the top 15 of tight ends.
Yeah.
You can get him as a tight end 2 or even 3. That's just kind of the route they're going, and just take your stand and pick your favorite.
Yeah, because one of them will do really well this year.
Mhm.
Not sure who. Most likely Jaden Reed because of the consistency. But if you get 6 really big Christian Watson games, you are not mad about that in one
So
bit.
your wide receiver 5.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the end of our list. We really appreciate y'all coming and hanging out with us. We've talked a lot about best ball during this, and we're going to do some best ball drafts coming up. It's getting that time where we're going to put out position rankings where we, now we have the schedule and we're going to compare the schedule to what we originally had and move some guys up and down. But yeah, so it's exciting. We're almost a fantasy football,
Oh yeah, I have been doing that every day this week, doing drafts and stuff for best ball prepping, and just kind of getting a feel where I can make my rosters and stuff. And not everything's perfect, but it's what helps you build towards a greater goal. So if you want to do a couple of those, and then that's what helps you draft for your fantasy redraft league with your buddies, like that's what's going to help prepare you. Because we got some guys that want to just not listen and then open their laptop right before the draft and say, all right, let's draft. And if you want to do that, go ahead. But I haven't seen a ton of success doing that. So,
Yeah.
Do your thing. We're not always right, but we're just trying to help guide you into a better, fantasy manager that, we all know that you can be. So, again, we appreciate every single ounce of support you guys have had so far. And it only begins from here because the really fun part is about to start.
Yeah, we're about to get into it. So we really appreciate y'all, and we'll see y'all next time.